density and diversity panel that we're doing. All right, thanks everyone for making it out tonight. My name is Abe Call. I'm a YIMBY Denver lead. I'm also the membership chair here at YIMBY Denver. My co-moderator is Harshit Badesha. She's we're co-moderating this panel. We've got a great panel here for you. A lot of knowledge on the stage today. From Denver City Council, we got Councilmember Darrell Watson, Councilmember Sarah Parody, State Representative Mandy Rutenau, and State Representative Javier Mabry. So yeah, a quick introduction here. YIMBY Denver was founded almost a decade ago for a simple reason. Outdated land use policy was keeping Denver from reaching its full potential and keeping people out of our great city. Denver should be open for all. Those who want to move here should be welcome to, and those who've been here for generations should not be pushed out. Housing issues affect people of all races and socioeconomic statuses. Yet YIMBY Denver, we have a reputation of being a little too white and a little too male. When I took over as membership chair this year, one of our goals as an organization was to get more diverse. We need to do a better job dealing with the structural aspects that keep people out. Parents with kids, people who work long hours, and those who need translation services, which I believe we have here tonight. So yeah, so thank you for that. That's great to have. We must look at who is here and know there may not be a direct representation of who is not here. We've had great success with housing efforts at both the state and city level, from a bill to ban occupancy limits, limiting parking minimums, and building more transit-oriented communities, and to trying to make ADUs open to all residential areas, and seeing if single stair can be a reality here in Denver and beyond. We've accomplished a lot, but there's so much more work to do. Hence one reason for this panel tonight, just to see what's coming next. And before I turn it over to our panelists, a quick thanks to our sponsors this evening, Revesco, Civic Centered Consulting, and Public Alignment. So we want to thank them for sponsoring, and thank you to IASIS for hosting us tonight. This has always been a great space, and we enjoy being here. And
let's do the introduction for translation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Natalia Ruiz, and I'm with COC, the Community Language Co-op, and we're here to do simultaneous interpretation for those that wants to have that service. Muy buenas tardes, mi nombre es Natalia Ruiz, yo trabajo para la Cooperativa Comunitaria de Lenguaje, y si usted quiere interpretación y escuchar desde el lenguaje de su corazón, por favor déjemelo saber, nosotros tenemos los aparatos aquí. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that we're here, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much. All right, now I'll turn it over to our panelists. Let them introduce themselves and do a quick 2 to 3 minute introduction of their thoughts on housing and what they feel could come next, and then we'll get to our questions. So I think Councilmember Watson, if you want to start, we'll move down the row.
Thank you so much, Abe. Thank you so much, Denver YIMBY. I truly appreciate the opportunity to be here. More so to hear from you and learn more from your thoughts as to things that we should be doing at the city and county level. I am honored to serve all of the residents of Fine District 9. And just so you have a sense, there you go. We got some here. For folks to have a sense of where the Fine District 9 is at, our western boundary is 20th. I try to give geography. So Coors Field is our western boundary. Then we go up to all of Globeville, Elyria, Swansea. We come down to 5 Points, the Art District, Ballpark neighborhoods. And then we have some of the historic older neighborhoods throughout Denver, for Whittier neighborhood, North City Park, and all of the neighborhoods surrounding City Park, and then most of Park Hill. I ran for city council because I thought it was important that we have a voice in council that will listen to community about the opportunities for tackling the housing crisis that's facing us all. I grew up with housing instability. I grew up in the projects, understood the importance and the impact of housing instability to young people, to families, and it was part of my focus to make sure we brought to council some common sense ideas on how to increase housing throughout, not just District 9, but throughout the city. I look forward to having dialogue tonight on some of the really great stuff that Councilwoman Parity and I and many of the other council members in Denver are doing, and looking for ways to collaborate with our partners within the state legislature. So thank you so much for having us tonight.
Hi, guys. I'm really, really thrilled about this packed room because housing is where it's at, you know. So I'm Sarah. I'm one of your at-large city council members. If you live in Denver, I represent you. I also live in District 9, about 3 blocks from Councilmember Watson. So you're very densely represented if you live on Lafayette Street between like 23rd and 27th. You're good. But one thing that's interesting about our neck of the woods, in addition to the fact that it is a gentrifying neighborhood, and I am a gentrifier there, is that it got downzoned. So prior to the change in our zoning code, it used to be that you could build things like duplexes and fourplexes. I live in a duplex. There's a fourplex at the end of my block. There's Section 8 apartments across the street, and then there's single family homes. Well, since the zoning change, a couple of small bungalows on my block have been scraped and replaced with lot filling single family homes when they could have been a duplex, a fourplex, even a sixplex, if the zoning was right. And so that makes it a lot harder for families with young kids like mine who want to be near Whittier Elementary, who want to be near City Park, the zoo, all of that stuff, to move into that neighborhood. You know, we all know what's happened to the cost. One small fact that I'm going to like put into the room that has been just weighing on my mind as we went through the conversation about the Affordable Denver tax that will be on your ballot in November is that in the last 20 years, incomes in Denver, and the average income in Denver, the median income in Denver, I should say, went from $40,000 to $80,000. It's not because companies started paying double. That's not what happened. That is a story of displacement, and that's really, really acute. Like, what a change in such a short time. So I've been thinking a lot about that, and that sort of gives a texture to like what we're facing here in Denver. So happy to be here. Excited for the conversation and the very excellent questions.
Hey everybody, my name is Manny Rutinel. I'm the state representative for Commerce City and a little bit of unincorporated Adams County. It feels so good to be in a room of people that want to legalize housing, so I just want to... Javi and I were on a bill together to ban occupancy limits to legalize roommates, so we're here trying to legalize everything, basically, in Colorado. I like what Abe was saying at the top, describing why this event is so important, and how YIMBYs have often been seen as too wide, too rich. But I think the two most popular YIMBYs right now are Kamala Harris and Barack Obama. So I just want to give them a quick shout out right at the top. I don't know if y'all have seen the rhetoric coming at the, yeah, I'm hearing some really strong yeses. So I'm really excited how like the tides have turned. It feels like we got the headwinds in our favor. Folks are really excited about building more housing. They understand that it's important for sustainability, for affordability, for building vibrant, inclusive neighborhoods. So I'm really excited about all of that. I have a story that's intimately connected to housing as well, much like Darrell Watson, and I'm sure Javi will get into shortly. But you know, I grew up with a single mom, and we bopped around the country looking for economic opportunity. But when the Great Recession hit, we lost our home. And that's the kind of economic anxiety that I don't wish on anybody. And I think after the Great Recession, we really slowed down our housing stock. And as a result, we've seen a huge increase in housing costs. And so right now we're at the point where folks are, at least in my generation, our generation, folks are closer to homelessness and home ownership. And that's a tragedy. And so I'm excited to be in a group of folks that recognize those facts and are excited to push policies forward and excited for this conversation. So thank you so much for having me.
Hey everybody, my name is Javier Mabry. I represent Southwest Denver in the State House, and I'm also a renters' rights attorney. And I am really excited to have this conversation on the heels of the day that I had, because we started today in a special legislative session that is about cutting property taxes in a way that will disproportionately benefit the wealthiest Coloradans. And that is absolutely shameful. Yes, property taxes are going up, but property taxes are going up because housing values are skyrocketing, and housing values are skyrocketing because we have a housing shortage. That is how that is what we need to address. And then later this afternoon, I spent my afternoon in Denver County Eviction Court. I'm a renters' rights attorney. I helped start the Community Economic Defense Project. And every Wednesday, we're representing tenants who are facing eviction. Today, I was representing a young family who had their kids with them in eviction court, and they had to wait for hours before they could see me because we don't have enough attorneys to hit to represent everybody who's facing eviction. I think people maybe have seen in the Denver Post that eviction filings are reaching record levels here in Denver, and it's absolutely devastating. I'm hopeful that that young family I was working with is going to be able to access rental assistance, but then the second person I worked with, they do not speak English, and their eviction notice was in English. And I took on their case for full representation because earlier this year, we passed a law, House Bill 1098, just cause for eviction. And in that law, it says if a landlord knows that a tenant does not speak English, then they need to serve them eviction paperwork in their native language. The landlord did not do that, and we're going to be able to bring that as a defense and stop that eviction. I ran for office to fight for policies like that because I grew up here in Denver. I was raised by a single mom whose only source of income was her disability check. And when I was a teenager, we were evicted. We lived out of the back of my mom's Chevy Suburban with our 2 dogs, bounced around from hotel to hotel. I'm a high school dropout, and I went back to school to fight for families like mine. And that's why I ran for the State House. That's why I became a housing attorney. And that's why I fight for housing justice every day in the state legislature.
All right, great. Let's dive into these questions here. This one's for all the panelists, so I'll just read it and we can get going. So the data in Denver is clear. We're losing both socioeconomic and racial diversity in the city with each passing day. Considering what your respective legislative bodies have power over, what do you think is most important policy for you to implement to preserve and grow Denver's cultural diversity? Feel free to include ideas that may take more than a year to develop, as a lot of good ideas can take some time. So whoever wants to get started can.
All right, we're all eyeing each other. I'm going to go. So for me, it's social housing. And what I mean by that is the city of Denver getting into the housing market as a player ourselves and starting to do something directly about rent, given that unless we get some state policy changes that some people have run repeatedly and tried for, we can't institute any degree of rent stabilization in the city. And so we have no real control over just the skyrocketing costs. It's also really hard to influence things like consolidation of ownership. So, the fact that housing has become a financial tool and an investment vehicle, and it's been snapped up by out-of-state companies in staggeringly large numbers in Denver, and that's both apartments and single-family homes. One of the only ways that we can really combat that is to get into that market ourselves. And so the model from Montgomery County, Maryland, I'm looking at Carson, who taught me about this a long time ago, is that you essentially start like a seed fund, you start building buildings as a city, and then you allow people in the community to live there and pay 1/3 of their income as rent. The key being that this isn't meant to be low-income housing, it's meant to be mixed-income housing where anybody can live and wants to live. And so then you get a cross-subsidization effect where people who are able to pay higher rent and not be rent-burdened are sort of covering the expense of the people who are paying lower rent, and the buildings can be maintained and remain beautiful and stable over time. And then you can run a bond on all of that rent income and have a permanent self-sustaining housing fund. There's other virtues to that. I got to go to Vienna earlier this year on a housing trip with Local Progress and Power Switch Action, and learned a lot about how they do housing there. It's so fundamentally different that all of the Americans who were on this trip, we kept having a hard time even like getting our head around it. So they'll say things like, you shouldn't use housing to speculate, like your house should not be your bank account. Like they think it's absolutely nuts that we try to use houses as piggy banks. They also, another quote from a city planner in Vienna is, your address should never signal your income. And think about how different that is than Denver, Denver, where essentially your address does signal your income, right? So I would love for us to get to a point where we're being really intentional about building dense multifamily housing that's beautiful to live in, that has the best climate values, and that has what we need in terms of accessible units, units with multiple bedrooms that we can use flexibly into the future because we own it, we send the rent, and we're not there as the city trying to make a profit off of it. So that's my big move, and I think it's going to happen, you guys. I really do.
So I love working with Sarah Parody, by the way. I am so excited that Sarah Parody is down there representing us citywide in the Denver City Council. Fully agree. Social housing is a major strategy. At the legislature, we need to keep passing policies that build on the upzoning work that we did this past year. And so Stephen Woodrow and Iman Judah ran a great bill, House Bill 1313, that provides for upzoning in transit-oriented communities. Really excited about that policy, but we need to do more. And so this legislative session, I'm going to be working on a bill with Andy Basenecker from Fort Collins called YIGBY, Yes in God's Backyard. And what that does is it allows churches to build housing on site if they want to. And I'm really excited to have that fight in the state legislature, especially since one of the most nasty legislators who we go up against on the Republican side is a preacher. And I'm excited to see how he reacts to us bringing this and to see if he all of a sudden is against churches being charitable, which I'm sure he is. But, another thing that I got to talk about is I believe that the housing crisis needs an all-of-the-above approach. I do not believe that the only solution to the housing crisis is supply-side solutions. We also need demand-side solutions, which is why we need to end the ban on rent stabilization in Colorado. We need to implement policies that go after people for rent price gouging. They're doing this across the country, and right now, rents are just pricing out everybody. I see clients who work multiple jobs, who've gotten priced out of Denver and then moved to Aurora and then now live in Thornton, who live in 2-bedroom dilapidated apartments that are $2,600 a month. That is unacceptable. That is unacceptable, and we should have policies in place that prevent price gouging in the rental market. And so I'm going to bring back the bill to end the ban on rent stabilization. I would like to see policies on price gouging on rents. And then lastly, I'm going to bring back a bill that will end the use of this price fixing algorithm that is being used. There's this algorithm called provided by this company called RealPage, and it's literally price fixing in the market. Merrick Garland, who's a pretty conservative attorney general, doesn't criminally investigate a lot of entities, is criminally investigating this entity for doing what we tried to ban in Colorado, but moderate Democrats prevented us from getting that done, and it's shameful, and we'll be back to fight on that policy as well.
Yeah, so I'll add that I think we've done a really phenomenal job in Colorado. I think a lot of states across the country are looking to us for all the incredible work that we've done so far. I agree that there's still a lot more to do. I really like the YIGBY idea. Excited to see that, and I think we might have some questions on that later. I think you mentioned that we're losing a lot of racial diversity in the city. I often find it a little ironic when folks in cities like Boulder and Denver have those yard signs that say, like, we welcome, Black Lives Matter, and we welcome refugees here, and all these things, which I believe that they believe it. But it turns out that the policies often that these same people may be pushing for are excluding these exact humans. And so I think what we need to do is encourage things like 4-plex and 6-plex housing opportunities in basically every lot across the state. And we need to streamline that process so that whenever, let's say, an owner-occupant wants to work with a developer to make a 4-plex in their lot to either accommodate themselves and extended family or to bring in new friends into that area, that they're able to do that in a streamlined manner. And that sort of gentle zoning approach that sort of slow zoning approach, I think can complement a lot of the transit-oriented community work that we'll be doing with really dense apartment buildings and things of that nature, and spread that sort of pressure along and across different parts of the city. So that's one thing that I'm really excited about. I'll bring up the occupancy limit bill again. Part of the reason why I think we were really excited about it is because occupancy limits have often been enforced against communities of color. Communities like ours that live in multi-generational households with people with different last names and things of that nature. So the hope is that we can combine occupancy limits, ADU bills, the transit-oriented communities, gentle zoning with fourplexes and sixplexes, and all of that to come together to make Colorado the best state in the country for housing.
And I agree as well that the strategy that we need to look at least from my perspective with Denver City Council and the work that we've been doing, is an all of the above approach. I know that we are going to pass within the city and county of Denver ADU citywide. It's been a long-term process, a long time that we've been talking about this, and it's going to go into fruition. Councilwoman Parity and myself are sponsoring that. That follows the work that the state has done, but it provides very much a clear process of which Denver communities across the city have been asking for us to take action on that. I think that's important. I think we also, I live in Whittier. I know there are a few other folks in the audience that live in Whittier. When I moved to the neighborhood in '97, the demographics was a third African American, a third white, and third Latino. As Sarah Parity stated, we did not, over that time period from when I moved in there till now, where I think it's about maybe 5% African American, and about 5% African American, and then Latino population is closer to about 20 to 30, and then the majority is white. I think there are very specific legislative things that we can be and should be doing within Denver City Council. First and foremost, I know folks have heard about a prioritization policy that the City and County of Denver has passed and we're beginning to implement. What that implementation does is for any development that we do in communities that are impacted by displacement and gentrification, if the city has an investment of dollars for affordable housing, the folks who are given first try at that affordable housing, whether it's rental or whether it's home ownership, are folks who are displaced from those communities. Implementing and executing on those types of programs will make sure that folks who were displaced move to Aurora, move to other parts of the state, that they're able to move back to Cole, to Whittier, to Globeville, to Elyria, Swansea. I think really doubling down on deed-restricted development and making sure that we're working with land trusts. One of the first bills that I passed was a sponsorship with Tierra Colectiva to build one of the first mixed-use developments on Washington Street, which is an abandoned street pretty much in Globeville community. And we work with Tierra Colectiva to make sure that we have deed-restricted apartments for families. And we also worked with Denver Public Library to make sure we finally brought a library into that development. So it's a mixed-use development that provides opportunities for families, as well as to ensure that folks that live in GES that wants to come back, or folks that were currently living that want to live in a family housing, had the opportunity to stay. So there's some practical stuff that we can do as elected officials. There are steps that we're taking right now. All of the above, from single stair to a whole host of stuff we're going to be focusing on in the next, not really the next, because we don't go out of legislative session, but after the budget process, we're going to be refocusing on a few of those other things.
So Representative Mabry, you talked about this a little bit, but so the state of California last year passed SB4, the Affordable Housing on Faith Lands Act, which makes it legal for faith-based institutions and nonprofit colleges to build affordable multifamily homes on lands they own by streamlining the permitting process and overriding local zoning restrictions, which is YIGBY, or Yes in God's Backyard. And so you mentioned that there's a bill incoming, and so as a construction and regulatory attorney, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the details of this bill and what kind of streamlined processes you guys are thinking about bringing.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'm super excited for this policy. But basically, in the question, you summed up the bare bones of what it is. But on top of getting after the permitting process, which you mentioned in the question, the other piece here will be upzoning on the lands that the churches own. And you mentioned a critical piece here, and it's that there also should be restrictions that the housing should be affordable. Yes, of course, we need housing at all levels. We do. But the most need is for people who are getting priced out of our city, right? Like Representative Rutinel mentioned, right? Our communities, Southwest Denver, traditionally a working class neighborhood, that is less and less the case because people are getting priced out. And so what I am excited to be working on is the affordability pieces here, what sort of requirements we're going to be looking at. I don't know because we're just starting to dig into the details. But essentially, it's going to be streamlining the permitting process, upzoning so that apartments can be built where they cannot be built right now, which this is particularly exciting because also in Southwest Denver, there are a lot of churches mixed in throughout the neighborhood. Where I live in Harvey Park, there are several community churches that are right there in the neighborhood that it would be amazing if they could build apartments. And so excited about the potential impact here.
A really quick thing about that. If anyone knows a faith community that's interested in this, my office is trying to put together a panel of churches that have done it in Denver. So Warren Village is in a former church, and it's beautiful, PSH, Permanent Supportive Housing. The Clarebound Commons was built on land that was owned by a church. And then there are churches that have started holding like on-site clinics and things like this. So if you know any faith groups that are interested in this, we've also been talking about creating like buddy systems where if you have two congregations who both aren't fully utilizing their space, maybe both of the congregations move in and use the same space, especially if they're maybe religions whose days are different, right? And then the other space becomes housing, and they jointly invest in that. So we're kind of at the very grassroots level trying to pull together a conversation about that in Denver. So reach out to my office if you know someone who's interested.
I just want to add just two things real quick. One is I was talking with somebody earlier before, and we're talking about perhaps including nonprofits more broadly into this bill as an idea that maybe Massachusetts may have already passed. Is that right? So that's an idea that I'm really excited about, allowing a nonprofit that deals with poverty to build their own affordable housing units. I think that could be a huge boon for our affordable housing stock. Another thing that I want to add is a huge part of the reason why I'm so excited about housing policy is because we are in the midst of a loneliness epidemic. And the reason why I bring it up in this context is because churches bring people together. And I wouldn't mind if one of the consequences of this is to allow folks to build community within their churches and to be nearby so that they can participate within their faith institutions. So that's another reason why I'm particularly excited about this policy.
All right, I think we're going to skip down a couple questions. This panel seems to be on the same page as we are, so that's one reason I love who's up here, because we seem to be, in sync, which is great. So I do appreciate that. So this is a question, I guess, for both the state and the local official as well. Since interest rates increase, many say the biggest obstacles to new rental housing development has been the lack of construction financing. In June 2022, Colorado created the Middle Income Housing Authority, which can promote affordable rental housing projects by enabling public bond financing for new affordable rental housing development. Has the MIHA been successful in creating bridge financing for housing, and if not, what can we do to improve its operations?
I was going to say, I'm not sure at all. I'm curious from the state's perspective if they've seen change, because, yeah.
I think it's too early to say if that policy has been successful. The one thing that I want to put out there is, again, I'll be clear that we do need housing at all levels, but in the state of Colorado, where we have Tabor, where our schools are underfunded, where our essential social service budgets are often on shoestring budgets, I support the use of public funds to specifically lead towards bridge funding and assisting in development of affordable housing for people that are on the lower scale of income. And, I don't necessarily want to see that money going towards for-profit developers to build market rate housing. We also need to open the door so that for-profit developers can build market rate housing. But if we're using public dollars on it, I want to see it go towards housing that, people who we called essential workers and heroes, our grocery store workers, people who work in restaurants, can afford to live in.
Yeah, I have 2 comments about this because it's getting at some interesting stuff. So number one, all of our existing finance mechanisms, local, state, federal, are not enough. The housing market has gotten so far ahead of us, and this is true everywhere in the country. So, one of the strange things about housing markets is that in a sense, it's a national market. For some people, it's a national market. And so we've been running and running and running, and people have continued moving to Denver, which we want and which is good, but it's really challenging for us to dig our way out of the degree of the hole that we've gotten ourselves into and the degree of the unit shortage nationwide. It's stunning. And so MIHA, Proposition 123, our existing, our D3 bonds that are about to run out, our LIHTC funding, CHAFA, name a funding source, it is not enough. So if there's anything I want you guys to take away from today, we have got to be able to start adding to the capital stacks because we actually have a lot of affordable developers and would-be affordable developers. Every time CHAFA has funding or there's LIHTC credits available, they are wildly oversubscribed. You have 10 times the number of projects trying to compete and get those dollars. So what does that tell you? If the public financing tools were available, the housing would get built with deed restrictions affordably. So please take that away. The other thing I want to say is to emphasize what Javier is saying about there's tensions in sort of our approach to housing around do we emphasize the missing middle, which is important, and I think that's where the market and zoning have more of a role to play, or do we start by meeting the greatest need and preventing people from becoming unsheltered straight homeless, which is happening in an incredibly real way. Eviction rates in the city, which are, I almost can't get my head around them, are leading to people falling into first-time unsheltered homelessness, including kids. Last year was the first time that I saw toddlers in tents, and I never want to see that again. So what I want to say about that is that we should be being really thoughtful about what tools we use to build which kinds of housing, and maybe leaning more on the market side for the sort of the near market type of housing. But it will always take more public investment to build the units that we need the most for the people at the lowest incomes. So when you hear people giving a unit target to close the housing gap, to me that sets off alarm bells a little bit because 44,000 units, for example, is a number that's been floated around in Denver recently. We could build that number of units and not touch the units that are going to take the most investment. If we built a whole bunch of units that were for people sort of making reasonable working class salaries and incomes, we could meet a very superficial numeric goal with less investment. What we need to be doing is investing in the really hard stuff. And so again, revenue, it's revenue.
And to be clear, I support more funding sources. So really excited about the upcoming affordable housing ballot initiative here in Denver that Councilwoman Parity sponsored. I would support more initiatives like that at the state level too.
And I was going to add, I mean, we got to be kind of careful with how deep we go to affordable Denver. But I think the important piece that we're making sure as far as education and information about affordable Denver is that there is a role for council. And I think structuring when we're looking at additional funding for affordable housing, making sure that the entity like the municipal leaders like us can create the structure in which we can actually build that funding stack as to where that funding should be going and ensuring that that funding is going to folks where the greatest assessed need is year over year. That's something I think is unique within Affordable Denver. I encourage folks to take a look at some of the specifics of what that is being promoted as it goes to the ballot. And thank you, Councilwoman. We're actually going to be tag teaming on this. There is a new working group within Denver City Council, and Councilwoman Parity and I, she will be chairing. I'm vice chairing it. We are going to be looking through not only this new fund, if the voters decide to pass it, but there are two other funds that voters have passed within Denver City, the Denver City and County. There is an affordable housing fund, and there is a homelessness resolution fund. Both of those funds, the level of transparency as to how they're being spent, and one of the questions we had earlier, is it really providing the outcomes that we wanted? Our working group will be very specifically looking at how those funds are working, how they're working together, and how we can make changes specifically not only to those funds, but the oversight and the accountability from the advisory team that currently manages those funds. So I think looking at the funding mix, the funding stack, looking at the funding that we currently have within the City County of Denver, and in making sure that we're creating structures to evaluate the outcomes and the benefits for the folks who need it the most, and then assessing those needs on an annual basis. I think those are great practices that I think Denver City Council is putting in place.
I did not go to law school to do housing finance, so if you have expertise in that, please tune into our working group and help us out.
So we've been talking a lot about affordable housing and all the different initiatives for affordable housing. So how do you all, and this is for all the panelists, how do you all define affordable housing?
Housing that people can afford. No one should be cost burdened. That's my policy goal.
I think one way to think about it is if you make minimum wage in your area, you spend no more than 30% on your housing option.
I believe that housing is a human right, and I don't care if you make minimum wage. You should be provided housing.
I agree with that also, obviously.
I agree with all of the above, but I also want to be clear. There are families that may not meet specific criteria that do need housing. There are folks, I would say, in my staff member, I have a young man that I hired on my staff. He's never worked in politics, never done any of this stuff. He had a little baby when he worked on my campaign. A year in, he's having another baby as well. Based on what Denver City Council, what we pay our staff members, he may not be able to remain in district because he just can't afford to find a space, but he is at a pay level that he's not receiving subsidies for his housing. He's making too much to receive affordable housing for where he was currently living. The housing continues to increase for the apartment that he's living in. He wants to move somewhere else. He's still making too less for that. So I think with City Council, I've always been really focused on looking really at the working people that I know, specifically looking at City Council staff. I want to make sure that our policies and what we put in place as far as affordable housing, that our employees also can benefit from that. And I think if our employees can benefit, the other working folks who are in that middle spot that are struggling to stay in Denver will be able to stay in Denver. So that's a very long answer to the question.
Thank you. One more question here, and then we can probably have time for a couple of questions from the audience. We do have some. I know there have been note cards floating around. There is a lot of evidence that the environmental problems of suburban sprawl and car dependency are distributed highly unevenly, with racial minorities and lower income communities bearing the brunt of the health impacts, not just pollution, but also traffic deaths. How can housing policy be used to reduce these inequities?
I'll start first with removing parking minimums. I think that is important. I think within the City and County of Denver, looking at transportation demand management and ensuring that when you're developing, for example, let's take a look at 38th Street underpass. I don't know how many of you have ridden your bike by 38th Street underpass? How many of you drive through there, risk your lives of getting stuck in the snow or the ice through there? I think we made a mistake in District 9 to allow all the development on either side. And this is just one example of what I think environmental policy, environmental justice, transportation policy, and how all those things intermix. There's been development on all sides of the 38th Street underpass, from Mission Ballroom to everything else going down towards Brighton Boulevard. None of those developments were required to invest in making a better and safer street under 38th underpass, and we continue to develop, continue to create transportation problems, and continue to have environmental impacts to the communities of the Cole community, going up to Globeville, Elyria, Swansea, and now with Pepsi moving towards DIA or Denver International, that massive development is going to require some level of TDM. And I'll say within my office, I've been very clear to all developers that are developing near 38th Street underpass. For any new development, you will be a part of the solution to make sure that that underpass is taken care of. We're going to move an idea to actually have bond funding to correct some of that, but the development around that one traffic node is going to be helped, supported by developers around that. I think we should have done that from 10, 12 years ago. We'd have had a much better route getting through there, and I think that's part of the solutioning that we need to do. Make sure TDM is involved, and make sure that we remove parking minimums.
Yeah, so one thing that I'll add is that I've been really, really excited that over the last couple of years, the environmental groups have come fully on board with pro-housing policy. So before I was a legislator, I was an environmental attorney, and I got to see firsthand the sort of divisions between the young environmental attorneys and the older environmental attorneys. And I think that's because the older environmental attorneys got their start in the movement in a world in which more housing, more development meant more fossil fuel use, more destruction of habitats. And so the only tool that they had was to be able to prevent all housing or new development from occurring. But now we have a world in which we understand that dense housing allows us to use public transportation, allows us to walk to work or walk to our friends' houses. And so there's been this union between pro-housing policy makers and the environmental groups that I'm excited to continue. So I represent Commerce City, and Commerce City has some of the most polluted areas, not just in the state of Colorado, but in the entire country. And what happens when you don't build enough housing in a place like Denver is that the poor Black and brown people that used to live in Denver move to a place like Commerce City, where rents or housing is a little more affordable. And so you have, of course, the redlining policies of the past, but you have market mechanisms that are just forcing poor Black and brown people into these sacrifice zones. And it compounds because these people don't have often the resources, whether economic or political, to fight back against these polluters. So I'm really excited about the housing policies that we're pushing forward that are going to allow us to build more housing in places like Denver, Boulder, so that we don't displace people into more polluted areas like the areas that I represent.
Yes, what they said. Also, I feel like that question was just looking for a one-word answer, which is density. I don't know. But I will talk about that a little bit. So how do we get more density in Denver within the bounds of political reality? I will tell you guys that a citywide upzone has no chance of making it through city council as presently constituted. Some of us would vote for it, many would not. ADUs has been like a fight, and what's hilarious about it is Daryl and I started the ball rolling, and then the state told us we had to, and we're still having to like kind of put like anyway, it's going to get done. Thanks for the mandate, gentlemen. Appreciate that. So one thing, there's a couple layers of complexity here. One thing is that there will be a local control fight at some point about all these issues, like who gets to decide, Denver as a home rule jurisdiction or the state. One thing I want all of you guys also to come to your city council members with, I'm one of them, so you don't need to come to me, but your other council members, is don't let them get away with couching this all as being about local control, because I'm concerned that we're going to end up in a position where Denver is using city resources to sue the state over density mandates. And that sucks. That's a dumb thing. So let's not do that. Tell your council members not to do that. And I will never vote for that. In addition, there are things, though, that we can do right now in Denver that there is a lot more appetite for that don't involve touching zoning. So Daryl got to say parking minimums. I'm going to say single stair. Yeah. Single stair. We've been sitting with the mayor's office, community planning and development, and the fire department, who are like the key constituent, because if the fire department is in the press saying people are going to die in a fire, I'm not going to get anywhere. Okay, so I have to get the fire department on board. I think we're going to get there. We've made a ton of progress. There are ongoing meetings. There are sponsors on board. So I actually think single stair can happen. And if anybody doesn't know what I'm talking about, some of you do. The idea here is that if you can within the fire code, if you can authorize buildings that only have one staircase instead of two, which is what they do in Seattle, in most of Europe, et cetera, get fire safety through other mechanisms like, forced air and building layout and all those other things, you can actually build in places that are already zoned for a lot more density, but the lots are not currently big enough, or it's just too expensive to build there. So I've seen maps, that have been done of this where it would unlock a whole ton of potential for density without touching zoning whatsoever, but just by virtue of the buildings having a smaller footprint. And you get more multi-bedroom units because of the layouts around a single staircase are more amenable to that, which we desperately need. So I'm working hard on that. And maybe at some point I'll be asking you all to email the fire department. I don't know. We'll see.
All right, that was very insightful questions from the panel. Appreciate you all being here. Frank, do you have any audience questions that we might be able to ask?
We do. There's not paper and pen, so I need a mic.
Yeah. All right, we can pass the mic down.
So if you do have a question, why don't you queue up over here, and then, there we go. Can you ask your question?
I think we'll probably have time for maybe 2, maybe 3, but we'll just, because we have to respect our host time, but yeah. Oh, yeah, come.
Yeah, if only 2 questions, pressure's on for me. No, I'm kidding. Hi, everyone, I'm Anna. I work in public health. And we know that health and housing are linked. I work specifically within social determinants of health. And while affordable housing isn't my wheelhouse, I have heard a few things, and I just wanted to see if any of you have any more information on this. So 2 things. One, Medicaid has a new waiver, the 1115 waiver, that I hear has, flexible, the potential to use some funds, Medicaid funds for affordable housing. So I was kind of curious to hear anything more about that, if Denver's working on that. And then 2, I heard that there are 2 federally qualified health centers in the nation, one in Colorado and one in Oregon, that are working in this area of affordable housing. So I just didn't know. Yeah.
Javier, you want to talk about the 1115 waivers? Were you on that bill?
Yes. Okay, so I really appreciate you bringing that up. I have also heard this as being a creative way to address the fact that those who maybe have mental health crises, maybe who have mental illnesses that are linked to their inability to find housing, us being able to use Medicaid to help them find housing. We need to talk about more about what this looks like in Colorado. Again, in Colorado, our budget is strained. We're already having trouble providing people basic health care with our Medicaid budget, but I am fully supportive of that policy. At the federal level, something I hope to see if Kamala Harris wins and they take the House and the Senate, and this would maybe limit our need to do this, is Section 8 vouchers need to be made universal, meaning everybody who qualifies under the program's income standards should get vouchers with no more voucher waiting lists, and that might address that issue. But absent that, we definitely need to look into it here in Colorado.
Okay, so Anna, I'm picking up what you're putting down. I love it. My longtime best friend is a Medicaid healthcare finance policy nerd, and I've learned a lot from her. So the 1115 waivers, Colorado passed a study bill in the last legislative session. So the deal here is that the Centers for CMS, federal Medicaid agency will allow states to do these like experimental like demonstration projects about ways to improve health outcomes of Medicaid patients. And so states have applied to use this. It's called a waiver. It's basically a way of like getting more Medicaid funding for something that usually wouldn't be covered, but for the same population. Some states have used them for like air conditioners. States have used them for all kinds of things. And a few states have started going the route of using them for housing. So the study bill passed and basically directed our state Medicaid agency, HCPF, to go ahead and assess what we might want to use an 1115 waiver for. And I think the study is due like next month or something like that. So a good thing to a good ball to keep our collective eye on would be whether the study bill recommends a waiver primarily for housing, because from where I sit, that is, as you say, like one of the absolute most effective things we could do to intervene to improve health outcomes. There's also other Medicaid waivers that we haven't gone after yet as a state, including a waiver for people who are exiting jail to receive Medicaid from before they leave until after they leave. So now imagine their Medicaid could also cover housing, right? So really, really good ideas there. And then the federally qualified health center that you're thinking of is Clinica Tepeyac in the Fine District 9. They have on-site housing, the Vinia apartments, and they are also really struggling with funding right now, partly because clinics like that have seen a far greater mix of people who are either on Medicaid or completely uninsured, including but not limited to from the recent migrant arrivals. And so they are facing a big funding gap. So if anyone wants to make a donation to somewhere really amazing, Clinica would be high on my list. And yeah, we should be doing more of that. And again, it would help if Denver had cash to put in the stack. I'm just gonna say that again.
Hello? Nice. Anna, thank you for the question. I just want to reiterate my point earlier on the public health perspective about the loneliness epidemic. When I talk about that, I'm talking about the fact that studies show that loneliness, long-term loneliness, is worse for your health than smoking a pack of cigarettes every so often. So this is housing policy. We're building in ways that isolate us, that separate us from communities, that don't allow us to run into our neighbors or to have a 15-minute walk to any sort of institution, whether it be your church or a grocery store, a bar. And so I think we need to build our communities in that way to sort of take into account the public health aspect of housing.
Hello, my name is Lucia Brown, and I am also a lead with YIMBY Denver, but I take a little bit different perspective than some of my colleagues. Today's City Nerd episode with Ray Delahanty came out today, and it was pushing YIMBY. You're in a room full of people who are ready to upzone now, and it's very disappointing to hear that there isn't the political will to do it, because that is what the juggernaut is. The juggernaut, Kamala Harris, Barack Obama, the rest of the Democratic Party is on board the YIMBY train, and if Denver City Council doesn't get on board, they're going to get voted out. So I want to see one of you guys, I don't care if you think it's going to pass or not, you got to get the conversation into the public realm, so you got to put it out there.
I take that challenge, like accepted and gratefully accepted. Thanks, Lucia.
Hello, my name is Carlin Russell. I'm a master's in urban and regional planning student. I also live in the part of Whittier that's very well represented by the two council members. So we talk a lot about TOD and we talk a lot about density and connectivity, and I think the elephant in the room on a lot of those things is that RTD does not currently provide a level of service that makes it useful for anyone. And I'm just wondering at both the state and city level, what can, obviously, they're super strapped for funding. So how can you work with and support them just to bring that level of service a little bit higher to make TOD actually a viable option for people that live here?
I say to the Whittier right, thanks so much for asking the question. First, my thought process is I think RTD has some long-term financial gaps that I don't think in my lifetime I'm going to be able to fix to get to the level of ridership that's necessary. And what I've been focusing on is for Denver to take the lead with our Department of Transportation and Infrastructure and continue to build the connectors that we have in Globeville area, Swansea. We have also in other parts of the city to spread connectors similar to the hop, skip, and jump that you see in Boulder, providing transportation to spaces and places that folks need and want. It's working right now at some level in GES. We've already began looking at putting a study together in District 9 to see if we could connect to District 10. So a connector between Auraria campus coming up and around towards 5 Points, including downtown. If we can find self-funding for that, as well as to empower and to fund DOTI within the city and county of Denver, I really don't think we're going to get RTD there from my perspective. I do believe the city and county of Denver has the ability to leverage funding federally, to leverage matching dollars from nonprofits throughout the country that want to fund these types of stuff, and also working with CASR to make sure that we're putting dollars together that are coming from dedicated funding sources. So we are looking at some of those things. We'll love to engage you in the discussions that we're having in District 9 about that to see if we can make it something that occurs within at least my first term.
Yeah, I mean, first off, I'll say a couple of things that everyone in this room knows. One is that Denver, much like most cities in America, were built with the car in mind. And so it's a little bit of an uphill battle to get public transit done in a good way, basically anywhere. The other piece, though, is that the density and public transit question is like a chicken and egg problem. It's like, what's supposed to come first? And I think the hope is that we've passed all these great policies to build more housing densely, and that'll encourage or enable for public transit rates to hopefully go up, commensurate with our dense construction. The third piece is that I think that there's some room and some hunger for some reforms of RTD to ensure that the folks that are in there are specialized and that they understand the topic as well as a professional would. So that's what I'll say for now.
Hey everybody, my name's Deep. Good to meet you all for the first time. I don't want you all to leave without some spicy questions, so I'm going to bifurcate 2 spicy questions. One for this side. The moderators can jump in too if you want, because I know you have some expertise on this. So for this side, from Harshi, Javi, and Manny, what's your opinions and feelings on construction? What's your opinions and feelings on construction defects? Is that going to solve everything? And for this side, what should happen to the 155-acre abandoned lot formerly known as Park Hill Golf Course? Woo! And you can direct at Kenneth right here.
Can I take that one?
No. You got the construction defects.
Okay. I really appreciate the question about construction defects because there is a group here in Colorado called the Colorado Home Builders. I like working with them on some issues in the Capitol. I do not like working with them on the issue of construction defects because I believe that they are gaslighting my colleagues into believing that if we fix construction defect law so that nobody could ever sue, that there would be an explosion of condo building in Colorado. That is just not true. And I've been working on this with consumer protection attorneys in this space. The home builders say Colorado needs to have an environment like Salt Lake City and Austin, Texas, if we're going to build enough condos. Well, their consumer protection laws are stronger there than they are here. And so I just do not believe that we need to be limiting the ability of people who put their life savings into buying a condo to being able to sue and recoup damages if the thing that they buy with their entire life savings is a lemon. That is just wrong. Now, having said that, I am open to some reform here if I can actually be shown that it is what is preventing them from building condos. But when you say that Salt Lake City and Austin, Texas are the best environments to build condos and their consumer protection laws are stronger than the consumer protection laws that we have here, I have a hard time buying it. Maybe there are some overly litigious law firms here going after people. Let's look into where we can maybe cut some red tape in that space, but I don't want to take away the ability of people to stand up for putting their life savings into a condo that ends up to being a lemon. That is not the housing solution, silver bullet that we are being sold that it is.
Nothing else from Manny or Hershey? Construction defects?
Wait.
It's too spicy.
Hobby keeps turning this off, and I think it's intentional. It's intentional. I've got nothing else to add.
And I was only asking Hershey because she was a construction attorney, but she might want to avoid it. So we can go.
It's not nice to troll your spouse publicly, Mr. Badesha. So lawyer couples are the worst. I can say that because I'm part of one. All right, Park Hill Golf. I've said it to you before. I'll say it to you again. Our easement was valuable. That golf course is now appraised at $3 million. So no, we did not need to give it away to Westside. I am glad we didn't do that. At this point, however, were I the mayor, we would have already exercised eminent domain and we would own that shit. I am not the mayor. I can tell you that wheels are turning behind the scenes. I can tell you that developers who speak the language of money, who paid $16 million for that thing, are not wishing to hold on to it forever. And I can also describe for you another thing that I saw in Vienna, which is in two parts of the city. So one thing they've done there for a long time is land banking, which we have not done in Denver. Denver owns virtually nothing. DPS owns lots. We've talked about this too. RTD owns lots. Anyway, Denver doesn't own much. For the parcels of land that we do own, though, one thing I saw in Vienna was a former like World War II airfield and also a former gigantic train station, which is a thing they have in Europe, that had been redeveloped in such a way where they were essentially designed as a giant park. And then at the edges of the park, a lot of parking garages were built. And then through the giant park, little zippity trains were built. No cars can come in the park. And then dense buildings just sort of nestled in the park. It's quiet. Your kid can walk. I swear to God, there's like one playground per child in these places. Like, it made me not want to come home. So they have these development competitions where if you want the right to build on this city-owned land and to take advantage of their city revolving loan fund, which is something we don't yet have in Denver, and I wish we did, you have to compete on social, cultural, and climate values and put your building into the mix, and then you might win one of the spots to develop one of the buildings. And so they're these gorgeous buildings that, some of them are co-ops. They're all built to really good climate standards. They're designed beautifully. And they're built in this like park-like setting that is quiet but dense all at the same time. And there's trains. You guys, there's trains.
Hey, I got to tell you, Deep, I don't think for me, it's not that complex. It is an opportunity for all of the above that could fit within Park Hill Golf Course. I think folks, let me get there. I think an all of the above approach, because I think sometimes folks have retreated to both ends into their ideology that it must be one way or the other. There was a plan that provided for 100 acres of park space that was dedicated, that didn't use any city funding. And there was housing that was necessary within Northeast Park Hill. There was a lot of work that was done on that. I strongly supported that, and I have supported that throughout the process. I believe now that we have an opportunity to actually bring both sides, and as Councilwoman Parity has stated, both sides are having discussions right now. I don't see a plausible process for the City and County of Denver leveraging our dedicated funding source for the next several years and purchasing that property. I'm not going to say in District 9, the parks that we're building within Globeville, Swansea, the parks at the Martinez Park in District 4 that's being built, that we stop all of that dedicated funding and we put it into one property. And so I think there has to be a movement away from someone has to win or lose on this. We have a property that can be providing park space, and also other amenities to Denver residents. And I'm more than willing to sit at the table and have a discussion, but I'm not willing to agree that our dedicated funding source, because I helped to write along with Director Clark, our dedicated funding source and the targets of why we have that source. And there's no one has been able to convince me that the rationale for using that fund should be used on one park alone. So.
All right.
Just to be clear about that, we're talking about whether we would purchase it as a park, which we could do with, so Daryl's talking about 2A funds if it was purchased for park use. If we purchase it for a mix of uses or partially park uses, we don't have to use the Parks Legacy Fund. We may be broke, and we are, but we do have $3 million, and that is the appraised value.
So, all right. No, actually, Brian, we don't have
We
time for
have
more
the
questions.
best
Sorry.
question coming. I
Ryan,
promise.
let me run this event, please. So, thank you. I just wanted to, I think we got a few more things covered, so unfortunately we're out of time for questions. I will say one quick comment I had before I turn over to Harsh for closing. There was a question being asked when the Parkview Golf Course was, up for a vote. How many affordable units are there? My question is now: how many affordable units are there now? So it's important to answer. So I'm going to turn it over to my co-moderator now to close up. I appreciate you all taking the time to ask questions and for wanting to ask questions. But I'm just want to respect the brewery's time. I know we got to be off stage by 7. So we got a closing, and then we got a quick call to action, and I think that should do it. So take it away.
All right, well, following up on that very intense conversation and great conversation, thank you all for coming, and thank you to our panelists for talking to us about, what's coming down the pipe. And thank you all for taking time out to making Denver a much better city, and, really looking forward to what's coming. And I'll pass it on to...
Yes, oh my gosh, guys, give it up for a great group of panelists. Thank you so much for being here today. And thank you all here for being here today too, and for engaging in such a critical discussion on housing issues. We've heard powerful insights and we've shared some frustrations, but the conversation doesn't end here. In fact, this is just the beginning. We know that housing crisis is a complex issue affecting thousands in our communities. But more importantly, we know that change is possible. Real, tangible change. And that change begins with you and I taking action together. If today's panel has sparked something within you, a sense of urgency, a desire to make a difference, or a commitment to stand up for what's right, I urge you to join YIMBY Denver. Our organization is on the front, yes, join YIMBY Denver, yes. Our organization is on the front lines of advocating for policies that ensure affordable housing options for all. We're not just talking about the problems, we're actively working on solutions. But we need you. We need your voice, your energy, and your passion. These are the forces that will drive momentum moving forward. Whether you can contribute time, skills, or our favorite, money, every bit helps. But most importantly, it's that together we can amplify our impact and create change that we want to see. Don't let this momentum fade today. Sign up at the back, visit our website, or talk to one of the members after the panel. As an added incentive, you get this super cool legalized housing shirt. The first 9 people who sign up today get this shirt. Frank, can you wave your hand? Yes, our buddy Frank here is going to help pass this out. He'll help you sign up to be a member. And just remember, the time to act is now. We need your help. Together we can make a difference. Become a member today. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
All right, I think that wraps things up for us. Thank you all for coming out. Feel free to hang out, grab some drinks, but thank you very much. And thanks for a panel. Yeah, thank you.